What's going on, everyone? Welcome back to the Modern Mortgage Show, where I interview mortgage professionals who share their stories and modern information about the industry. I'm your host, Rocco, and I'm thrilled to introduce my guest. His name is Michael Most, and he is the Vice President of Mortgage Lending at Guaranteed Rate out of Los Angeles, California. Michael, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Rocco. Pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me on.
Absolutely. I really appreciate you coming on today. So, Michael, why don't we start off the show? Maybe give us a brief introduction of who you are.
Yeah, so been in the business a little more than 20 years. When people always ask me who I am, I try to start with I'm a husband and a father first. And then for business, I happen to do mortgage lending. Married, live out here in Los Angeles, wife and 3 children, a daughter and 2 sons. So been in the business a little more than 20 years, started out in New York, moved to Los Angeles about 3 years ago, and have rebuilt my business here to expand it onto a platform bi-coastal, not just New York to LA, trying to get everything in between.
Awesome. So you've been in the industry a little bit more than 20 years now. Did you do any type of work before you got into the industry?
No, short, but interestingly, I was supposed to go to law school and instead went to work for a mortgage company just to beef up my resume, if you may. And that was 1999, and just got into the business, loved it, appreciated it, enjoyed it, worked my way up from a mailroom story, literally started as someone's assistant in the closing department, and worked my way all the way into originations, and have been doing it ever since.
So you were just trying to beef up your resume, and turns out that you just ended up loving it, and you didn't go back to law school, or you didn't go to law school.
I never even went to law school. I had a bachelor's and was studying for the LSATs, and so I started in 1999. In 2001, I had built that resume, and I went to my company and I said, "Hey, I'm going to go to law school now. Like, this was great. Thank you for the 2 years. I'm going to go." And that was just before the curve of the market, and they said, "Look, why don't you just try sales? We'll give you some techniques and tools, and just see if it works for you." And obviously, as you know, what happened in 2001 was the beginning of the greatest times in the mortgage industry. And the trajectory took off from there and never had a need to change. It turns out that I was good at it. I like math. I enjoy the interaction and back and forth with the clients and making the deal work. So 20 years later, if you like what you do, stick with it, right?
Yep, absolutely. That's very, very interesting story. So we're definitely in a weird situation right now, a weird time. So what are you doing to get through this disruption and uncertain period of time?
So this is different, and every time we go through these cycles, um, to pull it back for a second, our business, and anyone that's been in it for more than 5, 7 years, or anyone that's studied it knows our business is defined by one word, which is cyclical. So there's cycles. There's good years, there's bad years. There's no exact timetable to the cycles. Being in this for over 20 years, I've done probably 2 to 3 cycles at this point. So although I don't think this is going to be the same, I am familiar with some of the bumps. So for example, last Monday, all the non-QM lenders got out of the game, or at least 90% of them, or suspended all their lending. And it was just about a year ago that they were all jumping back into the game. So we also had calls this week with our senior management going over some of the products that are being pulled off the shelf and how lenders are pulling back on some of the products that they're doing. And it's familiar. I've been here. I've done this before. I went through the collapse. Last time, it was a lot more of the unknown. So I would say this time around, it's a little more, it's definitely easier for me to navigate through it. And what I'm doing, to answer your question directly, is education will always lead the path. So educate yourself. If I was talking to other originators or talking to myself, educate yourself on what's going on. Know and understand what mortgage-backed securities are. Understand why there's a liquidity crunch, understand why their programs are being pulled off, which programs are being used, understand the entire cradle to grave of the process. If you can educate your clients, your referral sources on that basis, not only will you continue to do business with them, you'll only strengthen your relationships and come out of this in a stronger position than you went into it.
Absolutely. Great answer. So moving on a lighter note now, so you've been in the industry for over 20 years now. I'm sure you've helped many people. What would you say is the most satisfying or rewarding thing about your job?
So for me, I'm more like I guess I'm a very mathematical thinker. So I like the process of the challenge. So I like when it doesn't all fully line up, and doing those out of the box kind of deals. I've done it all. So I started in correspondent brokerage world. I then worked for the big banks for 12 years, in those little white vanilla boxes, as we refer to their credit boxes. And then in the last 2, 3 years, I've come back. Part of my move out of New York to the SoCal markets was because of how interesting it is. No two people are the same in SoCal, and most people need a loan that is creative, or at least the parameters of the deals are always different. You have to be creative in how you figure out how to do the process. So we have it down to somewhat of a science in terms of how we break down the process from the beginning and getting all the questions and information up front. And I would say what I enjoy most about it is many people would think that our business is repetitive, but just on a personal level, I don't find it repetitive. I find that each client is like, this is a human being, and I could help them either buy a home, refinance a home. You can hear it in the passion the way I'm talking to you. It's the same way I talk to my clients. I like what I do, and I think that that portrays into my consumer base and referral clients.
Absolutely. There's no one size fits all. It's definitely tailor to each client specific needs. But yeah, so shifting gears here, when you first started many years ago, what would you say was your biggest struggle or obstacle that you had faced early on in your journey?
The biggest obstacle I faced in my journey, well, there's been so many ups and downs. It's a great question, actually. The first thing that comes to mind for me is the balance of life, a home life, and mortgage life. So if I had to put my challenge into one word, just going through a little bit of my history, like I mentioned, I was working correspondent 99 to 2006. Then I went to the big banks, and I was working at the big banks, from Citibank to Chase to Wells, all the big names, right? And I worked there from 2006 all the way until the end of 2017. And the last company I was working for was a company by the name of Capital One that now still is a bank, but stopped doing mortgages. But I would say that other than all those transitions of changing from one bank to another bank was in 2000, I was still at Citibank in 2014. My wife and I were living in New York in Rockland County, and my wife turned to me and was like, "Look, what's next?" I was like, "What's next?" At this point, I'd been rated number 6 in the country. That means amongst all lenders and everywhere, and I was the top of my game, top of the mountain. And I said, "What's next is I'm gonna work today and tomorrow, right? Like that's what's next." She was like, "No," like she really wanted to go out west, and couldn't handle the New York winters. The East Coast vibe was like too much for her. She wanted to come out. And I would say for me, the greatest challenge was making a decision in life that, not to get morbid, God forbid in any way, but I had this like vision of like my later years. And now I'm retired, or God forbid my deathbed, as people would mention. I was like, what do I want to be remembered as? Like, who do I want my children to look up to? And I said, do I want to like end my life as a 40, 50-year veteran of the mortgage industry that was like the greatest mortgage guy that ever lived? Or I had a choice then to stop what I was doing and leave the top of the mountain, as we say, and go restart my business and start what I'm doing with the same skill sets in California, which was extremely humbling. Come out to SoCal and restart it up, and we're still on the climb back up. I am nowhere near the top where I could be or want to be. But that humbling experience, I would say, was my greatest challenge of walking away from being on the top in New York and saying, look, what comes first is my wife, my family, my children, my future, and who I wanted to define myself as a person, and creating that perfect work balance between life and my day-to-day job.
Hmm. Wow, that's a very amazing story. Thank you for sharing. Uh, yeah, I guess that's an obstacle that doesn't really get talked about much is the balance of work life. So thank you for bringing that up. Now, let's say you were talking to yourself 20 years ago, or you're talking to your younger self, or even someone starting out. what advice would you give to someone, a loan officer that's just starting out in the business?
Get out. No, I'm kidding. No, the advice I would give is, look, this business, in every way, I've broken it down. And I actually have started a series now of like YouTube videos. Literally, I keep them to 60 seconds on a weekly basis of how do you grow your business from 100 million to 200 million. And the reason I'm doing this is because, like I mentioned, I'm rebuilding from the way up, right? Because I did all this huge volume in New York. Now I want to build it back up in California. But if I could go, and I have gone back to that person 20 years ago, and I said, okay, now that you're building this up in California, have a video sense and have a tracking of how do you do it? Because other than just grinding through it every day, what is the actual process? So I always live and die by this one thought process and saying, which is failing to plan is planning to fail, right? So I am consistently and constantly, and that's why Bobby, who put this call together, who's my head of operations, him and I talk a minimum every other day for at least an hour, and we plan. Because if you fail to plan, you're planning to fail. So I would suggest to anyone is have a plan, whether you're sitting with your manager, whether you're sitting with yourself, those simple business plans that look so stupid to you and they're on like 3 pages, do them, stick to them, have a conscious and cognitive concept in terms of what does your business look like? How many deals this year do you want to get from friends and family? How many deals this year do you want to get from realtors? How many do you want to get from past clients, right? And sit that down, because if you have a plan out in front of you, you can then execute on the plan, versus many people in this industry will most likely tell you that they're chickens without a head, always running around, no time, too many emails, don't know, how to get to everything all at once. So my advice to myself and to anyone that's starting out or anyone that's just rebuilding themselves is set a plan, set activities, have those constant contacts that you're spending your time on so that you're planning ahead. And that's how you become successful. At least that's how I found the path to a lot of my success.
Awesome. That's great. So yeah, recent years, since you started as well, technology has made its way into industry. You said you're putting together YouTube videos now. So how would you say this, how the technology has revolutionized the mortgage industry? How would you say this has affected you and your business?
So I was born in 1977. I never thought there'd be a day where I would list the year I was born and feel old about it, right? And I'm still young and I'm youthful and I can appreciate that. But I will tell you, and Nemo, who's a very good friend of mine, who talk about this all the time, who's like a guru of social marketing and media. He always told me, he goes, Michael, once you get into social media, like you'll own it, you'll be amazing at it. And I said, that's great, but the hardest thing for me, being born in the 70s and then growing up in the 80s and 90s, is this social media thing is completely out of my box. And most people in my age group, although we could, put out a post or like do like some basic things, it's been game changing for me to understand and
I think we're good. There we go. We're good.
Oh, sorry. I was saying is my adapting and understanding how to change to these times has been A, quite challenging, but B, quite rewarding, because it's a different set of engagement. So my only 2 cents on that is, and again, I like to give credit to where credit's due because it's not all mine. And Bobby Burton, who's my head of operations, said it best. When I was looking to hire him, we sat down in a room and I said to him, like, what can you bring to the table? And he said, everyone in today's industry is making a huge mistake. And by the way, for the record, Bobby's a great and a genius, but also 10 years older than me. So not only is he adapted, he actually knows his social media and understands it better than even I do, being 10 years younger. And he said, the best way to understand it is like a wheel and a spoke. What most people do with social media platforms is they put out one post on LinkedIn, one post on Facebook, they share something here periodically and there periodically, and they think of things in a very vertical way. So it's 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 are the 5 things I've done. The way Bobby explained and the way to really visualize it is that is in a spoke, is if you concentrate on doing multiple activities that'll all come together. It'll then spin like a spoke, and one actually feeds off of the other. So there's a lot of branding versus marketing and sales that goes on with social media. And I think that there's a huge value add to it, and especially bringing a human touch to it. Because I've been in the business for 20 years. No one's ever gotten to talk to me the way I'm talking to you here. We hid behind desks and emails and phone calls. I think there's a huge advantage to showing the human side of who you are and connecting with your clients and referral sources that way. And there's a great platform of using that in consistent ways to constantly be in front of your client base, but also showing the human side.
Absolutely. Can definitely be easier and simpler and automated and faster, but there's always going to be that human touch and human element to it that's just you can't replace. So are there any, let's say that any modern strategies that Bobby, yourself, you guys are using to scale your production or maintain better relationships with your past clients or even organize and systemize your business?
Yes. So as I mentioned, so I work at guaranteed rate, and that's where I'm at today. And the reason why I left is, and I hope I don't get into trouble for saying this because I'm only saying this in a positive way. That's all I'll preface this. But many people on the street know guaranteed rate as a marketing company that happens to do mortgages. That's kind of what I like about it. So again, I mean it in the most positive way. So guaranteed rate has tons of online marketing and CRM products and their own sales force that uses all these tools to stay in front of customers. And when I first joined them, because I used to be at the big banks before this, I always had this itch because I said, because when you're at the big banks, you don't really get that chance to be in constant contact with your client base like that. And I would say the main advantage is as we go through the current times like today, where we're going through a little bit of a refinance boom here with the rates being so low. And for the last 2 years, all that dripping that I was doing through our CRM systems of always staying in front of my contacts, I'm watching today how every day I get an email from a past client that I worked with at banks previous. They're reaching out and going, hey, I have your email, or even responding to an email that they got from me 7 months ago that said, hey, time to change the clock. So just wanted to say hello. And they're responding to that email and those simple drips that although there's no call to action with many of our client base on a daily basis because it's a very transactional business, staying in front of your clients and using some of that CRM and ways of constant contact with your clients, I'm reaping a lot of those rewards and benefits today with a lot of technology that helps you do that today.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with that. It's crucial to stay in touch with your past clients and, like you said, keep in contact with your database because if you don't, then somebody else is gonna, and then they'll be, with someone else. So where do you see all of this going in the future? If you have an answer for that.
When you say this going, meaning the industry as a whole or the current?
I'm saying technology and the way it impacts the mortgage industry.
So great question. Technology is definitely the wave of the future. There's no question about it. And as we're going through this coronavirus, as we see now, having a complete digital process and a no hands-on process, like today, and our company leads with a lot of this digital stuff. Today, we're doing online applications, digital uploads of paperwork, appraisals that are done by either drive-by or through systems that are checking appraised values. It's then doing a seamless underwrite, which is all done by remote underwriters that are sitting in their homes. Then it comes to closings. They're doing an all digital closing. So if you think about it, you can actually do an entire transaction from refinancing to even purchasing a home without ever leaving your house. That doesn't mean that we're being replaced by robots. It just means that we're being replaced by a more efficient process than as I started 20 years ago. I used to have to go to your living room and take an application with you face to face. And although there was a lot of a human touch there, it's now being replaced by a much more efficient way of having the data and understanding the story of the clients and not overcomplicating this. It shouldn't be an overcomplicated process that therefore scares homeownership away. I think the growth to homeownership will come from as these generations continue to adapt, and the future will become, hey, you need someone to help navigate you through the process, but at the same time, a lot of this can be done on your own. when I do just simple analytics, I find that the vast majority of my clients do their online applications and their paperwork between the hours of 7 p.m. and 11 p.m. If you think about it, those are the only non-banker hours, but yet those are the most convenient hours for the client base, because you have a job, you have children, you have a regular life, and you don't have time during the day to stop what you're doing and go to your mortgage process. But when you are able to do this on a digital platform that allows you at home on your iPad to take care of things for a quick hour at night, that's become a game changer. And that's how I think the industry is all going there. And as soon as the big banks get onto that and leave that bureaucracy, I think is when we'll start to see that across the board for all major lenders.
Interesting. Yeah, absolutely. Definitely technology and where it's going will make things easier for the clients, like you said, between the hours of 7 and 11. So it's definitely allows things to be done easier and an easier way for the client and the way the client wants it to be done. Now, last question here. Let's go to the buyer side now. So you spoke about it, advising and educating the clients. What do you see as the biggest misconception that or fear that clients have before working with you in regards to getting a loan?
Great question. So I think it's also, and it's a great segue from the previous question, which is, where do we see the industry going? In my humble opinion, I think, and especially in the SoCal markets that I work in, and even back to the New York markets, I think people really underestimate the value of the real estate realtor community and the broker community. I find them to be that the real estate agent and broker to be the number one part of the process. So therefore, there's a lot of hesitation with the client base. Everyone I work with, and I probably close between 200 to 300 units a year. But every single deal that I do is either a past client, referred by a past client, or referred by a real estate agent or referral source that I work with. You have to have at least one level of connection. Otherwise, you're fighting a battle of like lending tree and like, hey, how cheap is your rate? And someone else's credit report is $2 cheaper. It becomes a whole different game. The way I differentiate myself and the way I always suggest to other originators to separate yourself is to have a real relationship with your referral partners and your past clients. So in doing so, it'll not just make the process easier, but it'll also make them less reluctant. When most clients reach out to me, whether it's on email or by phone, they're like, hey, so-and-so, Rocco told me to call you. That right away opens up a completely different kind of conversation. And the first words out of my mouth is normally, how can I help you? Because it just changes the dynamic. So I would say that by far going forward is definitely about concentrating on those relationships and going back to people you've done a good job for and asking for the business and saying, hey, if you appreciate the work I've done for you, do you mind telling a friend? Do you mind referring me to somebody else? And the agents that I work with, the real estate agents, I think are, like I said, no matter how digital this process gets, and they may have to become a little more digital as well with more virtual showings and things like that. At the end of the day, you're always going to need someone to help you navigate through the process. And you see how the best originating real estate brokers in the country do that and are hand-holding and are great to work with. So that would be, to me, that's like the most important part of the process that I hope never goes away.
I totally agree with that. And Michael, I really want to thank you so much for coming on the show today. I had an amazing time speaking with you, and I really appreciate you taking the time to do this.
Thank you, Rocco. Appreciate being here, and so nice getting to know you a little bit and spending some time together.
Absolutely. And thank you to all the viewers for tuning in, and we'll see you again next episode.
Thanks so much.